tutorial. I've got a photograph of a model, and I've taken the camera lens of my camera or my phone, and I've tried as best to put it as close to street level as possible, put that camera lens right down as low as possible. And as you can see here, if I pull down a ruler, it looks like the vanishing point and the horizon line are about in this region here. You can see where different lines and vanishing lines terminate. And based on the scale of the model, that's not at street level or at eye level, 5 or 6 feet above street level. This is probably more like 10, 12 feet. So consequently, I'll place that horizon line there as a reminder, and any scale figures that I bring in, this will be kind of a little bit above head height, above head view, and we'll be able to see a series of layers of people and stuff that are building up there. Just keep in mind, depending on the levels or scale of your model, you want to set that horizon line appropriately and understand where it is relative to the scale of your model. It looks like it's about in the first story of buildings that are shown in this particular model. Next, I'll double click on background, and that'll unlock the image itself. I'm going to also duplicate that layer, the original photograph, and set that aside in case we need to come back to it for any reason. So I'll turn that off right away as well. And just make sure that there's a copy of the photograph in case we mess up or we need it for some reason. But I am going to turn that off so that's not visible. Next, I've photographed this particular model against the black cloth, which is a good idea, a good stable background there. What we can then do is under the select tool, we can use things like color range, focus area, subject, and sky for things. There's some nice shortcuts right in here now with the newer versions of Photoshop. Sky will not work in this case. It is pretty good for the outdoor photographs, but in this case, subject isn't going to work that well. Color range might work well here for selecting all of the black. And so I will take the eyedropper tool there and then select the black cloth. We can slide the fuzziness up and down depending on the tolerance of that. And as we can see, we don't want to select too much because we don't want to select some areas. You can see here Photoshop is asking me if I want to select all of this stuff. And so I'm going to slide that fuzziness down a little bit just so it's selecting all of the backdrop cloth and nothing on the model itself. And you can see there it's selected quite a bit. If we were to hit delete, then it would take away all of that background, but also might take away portions of the model in here. That may not bother you, may not be a problem at all. If that is a problem, though, I'll go to deselect and I will do a little Control Z here. And what you can do then is grab the eraser tool and make it a brush and just make it really big, like 1,000 pixels or so. And you can delete away this portion and keep a portion of it if you want. So just by erasing this portion here, we don't touch any portions of the model that have been included in this color selection. That takes away the background of the model. I think also I'm interested in, not sure if I want to keep this portion of it or not, but it looks like it's okay. Next, what I'll do is take a site photo. That I took on the site. And another one. So I have a couple photos here. This may be a photograph that you've taken of the site itself, or a photograph you may have from Google Earth. But I'm interested in a couple of parts and pieces of this. So what we'll do now is grab the lasso. The lasso has some interesting properties. There's polygonal lassos, there's standard lassos, there's magnetic lassos. And I'm interested in primarily this portion here, this background, including the city hall. So I'll make a lasso of that. And it looks, a few clicks involved. Another option is to try out some of the other selection tools. So we'll just delete out all of this. And it deletes everything away. Typically we want to unlock that background and then it'll delete away as a transparency as well. Let me try the sky tool. If I do a Control Z here, just as an option for you. So we can select the sky. This is on the newer versions of Photoshop. And it is one of the AI tools there. You can see it's selected the entire blue sky. And that works pretty well too. So I think that's probably more accurate than what I can do personally. And you can see it deletes away like so. So that's an option for you. I'll take this image now. I think what I'll do now is take the lasso again. So selecting everything or selecting the sky, a couple of different ways of getting some background in your images. So I think I'll do now is just lasso this portion of the site as a background. Copy that to the pasteboard, then go back to our original image, and then tuck it in behind. So paste special, paste in place, or just pasting it to the board. You can see here we can bring in that background and then tuck it in underneath our model view. And we have a depiction of the context that we can expand and stretch and adjust depending on our purview, what we think is going on here, and just set that into the background there like that. So now we've got a depiction of our model with a little bit of the Muncie City context behind it, and that can be expanded or stretched or adjusted depending on how you think that fits in for good measure. And so that then becomes a vista of City Hall in the background, Justice Center, and some of the historic buildings that we've kept as part of our context. That tree that's in the foreground gets covered up here, and so in that case, that tree is not something we need to edit out. If it bothers you, that's something that certainly you could cut out. Let me open up a sky, make a new layer. And again, that site photograph might be a photograph you've taken, or it might be from Google Earth. I'm going to bring in a sky though. So I've got a bunch of skies that I've downloaded, part of my personal Photoshop resources, and we've got some skies uploaded to OneDrive, and so those are available for you as well. And I think what I'll do is just open, I can either place that or open that. I can place that as an embedded image. I've just got all my cutouts. I've made several cutouts over the years. I've downloaded several cutouts, and I've just got them all in a folder that I can easily find. So there's some dramatic skies, and there's some Muncie appropriate skies. I've got some brick. I've got some lawns here that are things that we use for this particular exercise. So here's a Muncie appropriate sky. I'm just going to put that into the background and slide that in behind layer 1, and we can see that back there. It's pretty bold and very dark, so what I like to do right away is rasterize that layer, which allows me to modify it. It means I can sort of stretch it and move it around and turn down its opacity significantly. I don't want the sky to be overwhelming the view that I'm preparing here. There's some artistic license here as to whether the sky covers up the entire collage view like this, or if you use it as a frame like this. Either way, there's some artistic license that you can apply here. And kind of remind your viewers that they're looking at a collage view, that it is a proposal, in fact, an artistic piece, as opposed to reality. So there's lots of different artistic license that you see in some of these different collage views. That looks pretty good. So I've got a very bold blue sky, but I've got it turned down significantly so it's not overwhelming the foreground. Then I have some photographs of, I'm going to keep this active here. I have some photographs of people. Here's members of Section 5. So in terms of making our own cutouts, we can do that as well. We can grab the lasso tool again, or the polygonal lasso, and create some cutouts of our classmates and friends. That's how that would start to look. Let's check out and see if we can use the subject tool here and speed up some of our cutouts here. This is possible. And so Photoshop is selecting subjects. And it's done fairly well. If we can grab the quick selection tool, and I can hold down the shift key, and I can in fact add to that selection. Grab Jacob's arm here, part of his head, part of Ben's head, and Ben's feet. There are pieces missing. Jacob's shoe here. Ryan's shoes. That actually is pretty good. Get some of Lucas's hair there. Lucas's leg. That's pretty good. Okay, so I double click on this and delete. What I'll do then, the subjects are selected. What we do is select inverse, and then I can delete away those backgrounds and probably perform the operation again. Delete away these folks. And then I'll probably grab the quick selection tool again and see how it does. If it's not doing well, then the magic wand tool is a little bit more precise. You can see we can make judgments about the tolerance of what that magic wand does. By holding down the shift key, I can make multiple selections with that, and then start to cut away this portion of the context. And around Lucas's hair and face. Make a mistake, just hit deselect. I think the tolerance there, turn the tolerance up or down. Just continue to cut away these portions. Oops. Yeah, like that. So I'll do then is take the lasso and cut around. Just make a cut around the legs here. This group of folks standing at the site, around their shoes. Delete that away, deselect, come back again. I have a little more work to do. Here. These Using that lasso tool, deselect around, this is head, and around Brian's head. Just a little bit of extra background there. Cut that away. And then one last cut down in here. And around Jacob's hair. A little bit of background left up there, up into Ben's hood. All right, looks pretty good. So these are ready. A little bit of extra adjustment down in here. Just a little bit of extra background left. Deselect, and then view fit on screen. And then I'll just crop the entire image down. And that's ready to save. So I'll go to Save As, and we're going to save this as a PNG. PNG format will preserve the transparency of the background. Call this scale figure group section 5. Save that to the desktop. Close that out. And come back to our view here. Keep in mind, head height or head height is going to be a little bit different because the first floor of the building is kind of very close to the horizon line. So if we make a second horizon line, we have to remember that scale figures need to be below that horizon line. So I'll go to Place Embedded, and then I'll select the new scale figure cutout, bring them in. So their heads need to be below the horizon line based on where the camera view was shown there. And so they can, holding down, if I grab a corner in Photoshop, the proportions are completely preserved. If I hold down the Shift key, the proportions can change. That used to be the other way around, but now Adobe has fixed that significantly. So these gentlemen now are standing on the sidewalk there in that foreground. They are a smart object at the moment. I can also rasterize that layer. And when I rasterize the layer, then I can modify them a little bit. Sometimes we like to do some different artistic or pictorial effects with our scale figures and the like. Different possibilities with shadows and things like that, or layering them. Sometimes I put scale figures through a filter, like a motion blur, and so that they're less noticeable. Sometimes that means it allows your viewer then to focus on the foreground as opposed to objects or people. So just a little bit of blur sometimes is something that I like to do. So we've got our members of Section 5 now hanging out in our new development. Next, I'm going to focus a little bit on maybe doing something with the context. Another trick I want to show you here, just if I flop over to Illustrator, I've got a single line going here. Oops, back to Illustrator. I've got a single line here. This is a single line that's 500 points big. It's white. It's dashed, so under the stroke menu, I've got dash line selected here, and I've got no arrowheads on it. It's a fairly large line, but I can, with the dash here, I can make that the character of that really big line, significantly different just by adjusting the size of the dashes. This could be interesting because this is a fairly bold line now. This is a white line, 500 points tall, single line that's now dashed. If I export this particular line thing as a PNG and give it a name, I'm just calling it dash line and I'll call it a crosswalk, then we can use Illustrator lines and tools and things of that nature to bring them into Photoshop as different dashes or as different meshes or different things. In this case, this might become a crosswalk. And I don't need it to be 300, but I do want the background to be transparent. So that's now on the desktop. So if I place that now, place embedded, this particular dashed line as a crosswalk, it'll come in like this, and I can then start to skew it under the transform tools. Using skew distort perspective, I can make that become an image. Scale it. I can do things with it. Maybe it's sitting over here. So I can scale and skew that. Change its perspective under the transform tools. Fit that into place. And so that's another sort of trick I want to share with you, is that there are elements that you can build in Illustrator and export them as PNGs and then bring them into Photoshop as dashes and meshes. Probably need to rasterize that layer. And then I can stretch it and deal with it a little bit further as well. Scale it up, scale it down. Merge it with the existing perspective lines, etc. And or give it a blur or change its opacity so it's not as noticeable. So keep that in mind. If you need something line-wise in Illustrator, you can build it in Illustrator, export it as a PNG, bring it right into your Photoshop collage. Oops. And I think I'll just leave it there now and stop messing with it. All right, let's bring in some trees. Make a new layer. Place embedded, desktop, and all my cutouts in a similar fashion here. I have some grass too that's already cut out that can be used as well. But there are a few trees, there are a few groups of people. And there's quite a few trees that I've placed into a resources folder for y'all. That's on OneDrive. I provide that to the other CAP102 instructors as well. Duplicate the layer. Scale that up. In order to make that seem less duplicated, we can make adjustments to that particular object. So we can flip that horizontally and rotate it a little bit. And so that makes it look a little bit less duplicated. Duplicate the layer again. enlarge it, get that really big next to the gentleman there. Take that a little bit. And we'll put it directly behind the gentleman. So I might take the group now and put them up into the layer hierarchy so that they're in fact standing in front of these trees. I'll duplicate the layer again. Start to scale that down. Start to create a sense of the background here. Tuck that in underneath the other trees. And they start to layer together fairly well. Oops. So you want to select a particular object in Photoshop. If you hit Control click, then it's very easy to sort of isolate one particular piece from another. Probably want that tree directly behind the gentleman there. And this moved on me, so I'll move that around a bit. Bring in a few more people. Now all those trees right now, what I'll do is highlight all of those layers that the trees are on, and then I will merge them together, so I'll merge the layers. Now all the trees are functioning as one layer, and then you can start to do things to them. So I can change their opacity, as you can see, so they're less definitive. You can still see the architecture behind them. Another thing I can do is change their blending options. And I can go from blending mode normal to multiply. And what multiply does is it turns the trees into a transparent film so that you can see right through them. See, as you can see the objects right through them. That's an option for you as well. And change their opacity down, and so the trees are not as dominant as they would have been had we kept their object properties entirely intact. That can be, you can apply that same logic to people and other scale figures as well. If you want to take it even further, you can now start to select all the trees as a single unit. You can even filter them, provided that you rasterize that layer, and it is rasterized already. And you can also filter the trees with a little bit of a blur or a cutout or some sort of additional artistic effect to make your trees less dominant in the view itself. Sometimes a little blur just makes them look a little bit less definitive. And that's starting to look pretty good. I think I will place a few more people. Place embedded, and just keep adding more people. I have a few parked cars cut out as well, a few bicyclists, things of that nature that I've found at different places. Bring him in, turn down his opacity a little bit, give him a little bit of a blur. Press enter first, depress enter first, and blur him just a little bit. More scale figures. I have several folders set up in the resources folder for you, but other places that I like to find them on the web. There's a Swedish website called Skalguber. Yeah, that's its real name. And it is free cutout people, and it's at skalguber.se. So it is a Swedish website. So it's got cutout people from a lot of different situations. You just scroll through the entire gallery like this, and you grab the person that you're interested in. And they appear like so, and then you can do a right mouse click and save the image as to your downloads or to your desktop. The gallery has grown in the past few years, but you can definitely see there's a few different situations and a few different seasons impacted here. There's a story behind each one too, which is kind of interesting. There's people in seated positions as well. So there's a few there. Click on her, she'll come right down to the downloads folder. So you can right click and save as, or take it right to the downloads folder. Another one is called Non-Scandinavia. Cutouts. It is a response to Skalgubber in that it was seen that Skalgubber's cutouts were primarily Scandinavian in that sense. So Non-Scandinavia is a response to that, so it has some additional cutouts. But you can see here they're a little bit distorted, and I think they're distorted perhaps just for artistic effect. If you go to originals, then you click on a disclaimer, and then you can bring in their collection. And if you've looked at renderings like I have in the past few years, you can start to recognize a few of these people because they appear in a lot of architectural renderings. So different groups of people walking away from the viewer or walking toward the viewer. So there are some additional representations of people and stuff that can work for you as well. So I'll download some seated people, and again, do a control click or a right mouse click, you can download the image to your folder. Just be sure that you're using the originals and not the distorted versions. There's even people seated that you can bring in additional street furniture, more bikes, folks walking, things like that. And we can start bringing them in. So we go to place embedded. I might have some of these already. I always like to have some figures really close to the back into the foreground, so good resolution is good. That way you've got part of the story isn't just the people in the middle ground. I always like to have some folks in the foreground. But again, I still might apply some of the artistic effects to them. Filtering, blurring, things of that nature. And you see people in the background now. So they need to be a little bit further back. For instance, turn down their opacity, press enter, and then blur them a little bit. All right. Again, these folks you might start to gather them all into a group. All of your scale figures might start to function very well as a group, so I will merge those layers. And now all my scale figures are on one thing. A little bit of adjustment to the workflow as well. If you want to place all your figures first and then merge them, those layers first, then you can apply the same sort of opacity and filtering and blurring and things of that nature all together at once. It saves you a little bit saves you a couple of steps. I'll turn those off now. I think I want to turn those off and maybe work on the architecture a little bit. So this has some properties, and I think it might be worth perhaps looking at some of these and thinking about applying some sort of color or materiality to them. So I'll make the lasso here. And just maybe think about applying a gradient or applying some sort of film to it. Make this a new layer. You call this the facade or something like that. Okay, I think I'll do is maybe look at this a little bit closer, just one building at a time. So what I'll do is work from forward to back and think about this as some glass or a color or as a gradient. So if I do a gradient here, I'll pick a foreground color and then a background color. And then under the paint bucket is something called the gradient tool that will now paint a gradient in this shape like this. Probably do it this way. And then I'll turn the opacity down. And that starts to give the impression perhaps of glass or something like that. Deselect. It covers up some aspects of the model. It just makes the model look a little bit more diaphanous in terms of material. Probably repeat that. And go this way. Select. Yeah. Yeah, I'm liking where that's going, I guess. Just adds another layer of interpretation to the model. The models have a certain amount of conceptual artistic license to them, and this can just add a little bit of extra. Anyway, that, and then come over here. Do something with this. And all of this is on one layer, and so I can deal with its opacity. Make it look really diaphanous or kind of transparent. And if I click on, right mouse click on, or control click on blending options, I can make it look like a transparent film, like so. It just adds a little bit more to that. And I liked normal. I think I like the normal. There's dissolve. There's other blending effects. Linear burn, darker color, lighten screen. So color dodge. So we look at that. There's overlay, hard light. So there's some different effects here you can check out. I kind of like where that's going there. And just like we did with the dash line crosswalk, we can come back to Illustrator and we can even think about a mesh for that. This is back in Illustrator. I'm going to push this down a little bit. 10 point dash line. 50 or even 100 point dash line. Maybe it's a 10 point dash line. Push that a little bit. Change the color of this stroke here. Make that kind of a brown or a kind of a brick terracotta or a pretty soft brown like that. And I'll export this. Illustrator and see what we can do here. Maybe do something with a facade, something like that. Maybe apply this as a mesh of some sort. So that could become part of the architecture. And I'll hit that with the perspective tool. I have to hit it with the skew tool too. Imagine I do. Just kind of skew it down like that. There. Yeah, we'll put that on top. So this is maybe imagining some sort of mesh on this facade as well. And I'll copy that. That can be rasterized and that can be turned down in terms of opacity. And I can copy that, apply it now to the other portions, these other buildings. Oops. Choose the active layer I want. Put that over there. And so without a lot of advanced computer modeling, we've just done a couple of Photoshop effects to make these buildings look like new modern pieces above, beyond the model that you've created. I'll duplicate that layer. Make another one. Take it, I'll flip it around. Just using the rotate tool. So we go to transform, rotate, or flip horizontally. I'll flip this over now. Oops. Take this little guy here. Skew it. Skew it into place. Just give it an impression of a building there. Oops. Still moving a lot of stuff here. Make sure we're moving the right thing. Skew it a little more. And that just gives a mesh on that urban building. Okay, next, I'm going to bring in the flag. So place embedded. I've got the city flag. Bring this in a creative fashion. This could be a paving pattern on the pavement. This could be flying in the background. It could be applied as part of a billboard or part of a sign. And so what I'll do, figure out where we are here in the foreground. And I'll change the opacity. Maybe do a blending option on that. Something like that. And then bring that into the perspective as well. So maybe it can appear as a mural or a billboard. Just a few creative things that you can think about for this. So maybe it's part of this building here, or part of its signage, or kind of a floating sign or something like that. or it could be flying on a flagpole or something like that. But with the same tools, the distort tools and things like that, you're able to take care of that. Okay, let's kind of see where we're at, shall we? Turn some of these layers back on. Got sufficient people in there. We've got a copy of the original image. Got things kind of blurred, things like that. You can think about some things you want to do with the sky. If you want to change the sky, the color of the sky to a pink sky or orange sky or something like that, feel free to do that. More artistic license that you can start to do. Let's see where I'm at in terms of trees and stuff. Let's see here. Take all my dash lines and mash them together by putting those layers together. Oops. Just want to merge those together here. I can link the layers and I can merge the layers. Either way. And turn that opacity down a little bit further. Looks pretty good. Let's see where I'm at just in terms of trees, things like that. Just make sure things are where they need to be. The trees need to be further up in the layer order. They need to be sort of in front of things. In front of things, behind things. Maybe the flag is noticeable there. The flag is below the trees. Maybe it's a little bit more noticeable as part of a facade or part of the architecture. Take that around a little bit. Okay. I need more people, for sure. There's a group in the background there. They're all grouped down together, so I probably need more people. But I do like where this is going. So let's see if I can merge those layers. Okay. So the dash line is on top of the facade. And then group should be in front of everything, should be in front of the trees. The trees can be maybe turned down a little bit. And the context can be turned down a little bit as well. So I use opacity a lot just in terms of keeping the artistic vision of the whole, kind of reminding folks they're looking at a collage, they're looking at a proposal. So that becomes a little bit clearer. And I think I like where this is going now. Still not satisfied where the flag is. Maybe it's over here somehow as part of the architecture. Okay. A few more people, but what I'm gonna do now is when I do this kind of stuff, I want to keep all these layers intact. So what I'll do first is do a save as. I'll save a PSD Photoshop file. So this is, we'll call this Unit 5 Collage 1 Layers. And what this does, it saves a Photoshop document, PSD, with all the layers intact. So that'll be part of our personal digital files. And what I'll do is I'll save this as a copy. And so we can take a look at it. We'll turn the layers off and we'll save this as a JPEG or a PNG or a TIFF, one of those. And so I make sure that this is merged. And so we can see the effects of some of the decisions we've made. Photoshop will save that. I'm not going to save that. I'm going to close this out and then I'll open the new merged collage so we can see it. And that way you can see the effects of the decisions we've made. You can see the layers layered up. We can see the transparencies layered up, that sort of thing. And we can see the background, all those things. The entire view now can be taken through a filter. If we're not satisfied with how things look, sometimes it helps to take everything through a filter. So if we go into the filter gallery, there's quite a few things that this could look differently with. Colored pencil doesn't work that well. Film grain has a way of distorting some things that are nice. Poster edges is interesting. Sponge is a little bit tough. The watercolor filter makes it kind of look like a watercolor. It does a good job of dealing with things from a lot of different sources, but I do tend to turn up the brush detail, turn down the shadow intensity, and I do tend to turn up the texture. So the watercolor filter, if you feel like the drawing or the collage is really feels kind of foreign, the watercolor filter can have a pretty positive effect for you in terms of that. And it has a way of sort of putting everything together in a way. So that's a filter we can put through as well. Another one that's interesting, it's called the Cutout. Let's see if I can find it. Some of them are black and white as well. Stylized, texture. The Cutout one is interesting because it's really distorted. You can see you can make a very artistic. But the Cutout can work. Let me try sliding these here. No, not so much. But the Cutout can be an interesting filter to experiment with. Let's look at edge fidelity. There. Okay. And that gives you kind of that post-digital look that you see in some websites and on Pinterest. The Cutout can make all this kind of feel like it's coming from the same source and give you a really an interesting artistic expression with kind of a post-digital look, kind of what you're seeing at some of the websites and on Pinterest. Personally, I'm going to stick with the watercolor layer or the watercolor filter because it has a way of putting these different things together. Looks like I've got some distortion back here I still need to fix on my original, so I'll cancel back out here. Yeah, I think I've still got some leftovers, so I need to fix that. So I will reopen my PSD, and I don't need this one. Get rid of that. I think what I need to do in my layer 1 is do a little more cleanup. Turn off my sky. Turn off my layer 1. Yeah, that's where it is. So I just need to come in here and clean up a little more around. There's a little bit of that black curtain that remained, and I think that residue is coming through. So I'm just going to quickly lasso that out, get that out of there. Delete that. Make sure that's the active layer. Delete that. I'll turn everything back on again. See where we are. I do like a lot of people in these collage views. So if I were to keep going with this, I would probably add significantly more people. But this quickly starts to give you an idea of some of the types of collaging that you can get out of a simple camera view of your model. All right, so now this is ready to save. I'll save another copy. I'll oversave the other JPEG that I made. desktop. I'll just oversave the other JPEG that I made. Take a look at it. See how it's doing. Oh, no, that's not what I wanted to happen. Looks like the layers have been preserved, so I can just flatten this image. There we go. Now you can see the transparent background is gone. The full effects of the sky are there. The trees that are somewhat diaphanous or transparent. And I can put all this, I'll move this out of the way. You could certainly be more precise about things, but you can see I've worked rather quickly here. Put all this through a filter. I think I'll stick with the watercolor filter. And the watercolor filter just has a way of kind of making everything look like it belongs together. And save that as a filtered version. And we'll call that done. So let's hit Photoshop, and then we'll take a look at the filtered version here in full view. Thank you.